Welcome to Code Clear. I'm your host, a trauma surgeon on duty. Let's dive in.
Hey, I'm Arrington Thompson. I'm a trauma surgeon, and I just started this new podcast called Code Clear. In theory, my goal is to try to clarify some of the things in medicine that are confusing. And I thought I would start with one of the things that when you travel the internet and you go on social media, there's all these people who are, quote, experts in nutrition, and they're telling you that you need to eat this and not eat that. I figured I would find a person who is actually an expert in nutrition. And we've got Jessica Runyon. She is a registered dietitian. She's got a master's degree. Your master's degree is in exercise dietetics, is that right?
Well, I have one in dietetics, and then I completed a second one in exercise science.
Because one is not enough, right?
One's not enough.
One is not enough. So then, because that's not enough, we needed to go get a doctorate, right? And you got your doctorate in?
Clinical nutrition.
Okay. So I think, without a doubt, especially in this conversation, you are by far the expert in nutrition. And let's just start at the basics. I'm sitting down at the table and I'm going to bite into an apple. And as far as I know, if I bite into an apple, the apple should have three basic components of, I guess you would say, nutrition. It should be proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. What do those things mean? What is that?
Well, those carbohydrates, proteins, and fat are what we call the macronutrients. Those are the things in our diet that provide energy, and they do different things throughout the body, but when we're talking about those three things, those are the macronutrients.
The macronutrients, and we all need those, right?
Yes, we all need those in combination, and then depending on your age, your sex, how active you are, those things change for each individual.
Okay, so let's just start with the basics, and let's start with carbohydrates. We can't cut out carbohydrates, right? We do need to have some carbohydrates in our diet in order to survive.
Yes. It's the preferred source of energy in our body.
Preferred meaning that's what our body would really like to use. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's what it goes to first. And, during strenuous exercise, that's what burns the quickest to give us our fast energy. Depending on what kind of carbohydrate you're eating, there's different nutrients found in each one. So very much needed in our diet.
Okay. One of the other things, of course, is proteins. And there seems to be a push now that we need to have more protein. And my mom always used to tell me that too much of anything is not good for you. So first of all, we do need proteins, correct?
Yes.
And then, is there a limit to how much protein we should be chugging?
It is, again, it's different for every person. And there were new sets of dietary guidelines that came out really at the end of last year, beginning of this year. And it was higher than what was previously recommended. Previously, the RDA, what's recommended for most Americans, is 0.8 grams per kilo per day. And these new guidelines really suggested that we increase it to somewhere between 1.2 and 1.6 grams per kilo per day. And while those guidelines don't change the RDA, I think a lot of the nutrition research that's come out with protein really does suggest that we need those higher levels. With the chronic illnesses that are really prevalent in our society, a lot of those carry a low-grade inflammation process with them,
right?
Which can kind of make us waste our lean muscle a little bit faster.
Okay.
So making sure we're getting enough protein in to really maintain our lean muscle mass. Now, again, that's going to be different for everybody. There's certain conditions where, too much protein is not a good thing. But there's definitely a lot of conditions that do require more protein.
And then let's finally get into fats, because I guess the last 30 years, 40 years, fats have gotten a bad rap that we're trying to cut fat. There's too much fat. And so where are we with that? I mean, there's some fat, like we were saying before, with the protein and carbohydrates that are essential.
Mm-hmm. There are. Fats make up so many different things in our body, especially like our cell membranes. It helps with hormone production. There's a certain amount of fat in our diet that is really needed for us to do our daily activities. So I definitely don't like it when people want to completely cut it out. At the same time, it's probably not a good idea for us to only eat that one macronutrient. And I think the source of the fat, the type of fat that people are consuming, is just as important, if not more important, than how much they're consuming.
So what source should we be looking for fats?
I
honestly, should I get like a big tub of butter and just jump in, or that's probably not the right answer?
So this is actually a kind of a big controversy, because in the new dietary guidelines, it does recommend full fat dairy, and it recommends a lot of red meat, using butter and beef tallow. All of those, of course, are sources of saturated fat because they're an animal product. But then as you dig into the guidelines and actually read, they suggest that you limit the amount of saturated fat that you're consuming to less than 10% of the total calories. So I like to always suggest that, we're eating, getting some fat from nuts, that we're using, if you're cooking at home, using olive oil, canola oil, more so rather than using the saturated fats. But again, that's one of those things. It's contradicting. It's what makes my field so frustrating.
We'll
and
say interesting
to the public.
We'll say interesting. We'll go with that.
Okay, yeah, that's a good term.
We'll go with interesting. So one of the things that I wanted to do was to talk about some of the myths that are out there, and there are people who tout healthy foods that really aren't healthy. And I guess the one that I kind of think of the most, and I'd like to hear your take on it, is my favorite granola bar in the morning. I will have a granola bar every morning, and those were for years touted as healthy, and I'm not sure they're as healthy as they're touted. What are your thoughts?
Granola is one of the easiest ways for some food companies to sneak in extra sugar into our diet. Added sugars have definitely been something that have been the focus of the wellness industry, but also, the nutrition industry as well. And I always recommend for people, if you enjoy eating your granola bar in the morning, maybe we can compare different brands to see if there's one that has less sugar in it. But keeping in mind that most foods can be incorporated into a healthy diet. But those foods, things like granola bars, the ready to make, the yogurts, are also a breakfast item where you can actually get a little bit too much sugar.
So there's such a thing as too much sugar? Is that? I think that's anti-American. I don't think you can say that on this thing.
Goodness, I know. The guidelines actually said that there is no recommended amount of sugar, and I do think it's about balance. I think it's about being consistent day in and day out with our food choices. So again, if someone is consistently eating foods that are higher in sugar, you could see some poor health impacts.
Sure. So there's also a big controversy on ultra processed foods. And as a surgeon, who looks at data, one of the things that I like to do when I see things like this is try to figure out what is the definition. And I'm not sure I've ever found a good definition of an ultra-processed food. What are your thoughts on that?
I would agree. There's not a true definition of what makes an ultra processed food ultra processed. How I explain it to most people, I would consider an ultra processed food something that I can buy in the grocery store that I could not recreate in my own home, in my kitchen. I couldn't cook an ultra processed food and make it taste the same way as the grocery store.
So would we go with Cheetos? I think that was probably a good a good suggestion, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so our thoughts on ultra processed foods is that they should be completely eliminated, or we should, as you were saying before, everything in moderation.
That's what I say. I say everything in moderation. I mean, there are days where, goodness gracious, I just want a Lay's potato chip. And if I really want one, I'm going to have one. But it's not something that I consistently incorporate into my diet every single day. The same way, I think the big issue, what we have in our culture, is that those foods make up the majority of some people's diets. And if we're focusing more on eating more whole foods, fruits and vegetables, whole sources of protein, and then using those foods as, a sometimes food, every once in a while you can have them, I think that's probably a better mindset on how to approach those foods.
So let me tell you a tale and get your take on it. This is a patient that I took care of years ago. She was a 4-year-old that had a sunburn. It was a terrible sunburn. They were out at the lake, and of course, skin's very, very fair. But also, she weighed at 4 years old close to, I think, 85 or 90 pounds. So she was very, very big for her age. And I consulted the pediatrician to go by and talk to them about nutrition and a healthy diet and all those good things. And as I was rounding, I actually walked in on their conversation, and the pediatrician asked, do you feed her any fruits? And the mom's face just lit up, and she said, oh, yes, of course. And she went into her bag and she pulled out a fruit roll-up. I swear to you, God. And I would go ahead and say that a fruit roll-up would easily go into an ultra-processed food. And for those people who are not educated, it's easily to get fooled because of the name. It sounds like it should be healthy. And I'm not sure there's anything healthy in a fruit roll-up. I've got nothing against fruit roll-ups, but I don't think there's anything in there of any nutritional value. You might as well just eat the wrapper.
Absolutely. Great marketing team, though, right? Coming up with that name.
Right. One of the things that also comes up is the amount of water we should be taking in every day. And as you know, we both work in the hospital, there are some people who are very, very diet conscious, and they are carrying around these huge jugs of water, which they are chugging down every day for various reasons. Some people are doing it to suppress their appetite. Some people are just doing it to increase their water. Anyway, what are your thoughts on water intake, and where should we be with that?
The numbers for recommendations for men, it's 3.7 liters per day. For women, it's 2.7 liters per day. Again, but that's all based on the individual. So, not a fun topic to talk about, but, looking at the color of your urine after you use the restroom, definitely don't want it super clear, but you don't want it super dark either. So that's kind of how I tell people to judge, because, there's some people who are drinking so much of it that too much of a good thing could be detrimental to health. But then there's a lot of people that don't quite get enough. And then something else for us to consider, it's, we don't just get our hydration through water. There's certain foods that contain a lot of fluid, fruits, some vegetables. If you're consuming things like soup, all of those contribute to our hydration status.
So tying in with that, what about those that have their coffee or tea in the morning? How much does that count, or does that count at all, or should we just write that off as not counting?
I count it. I tell people to count it. There is some research showing that caffeine can act as a mild diuretic, and but I have not seen numbers that truly would link caffeine consumption to straight dehydration. So I count those. Thank goodness, because coffee keeps me alive most days. Incorporating some regular water in there, but I wouldn't want to be me or around me if I didn't have my coffee.
Tell me a little bit about vitamins and what we should be doing with vitamins, because and probably in a separate conversation we'll talk about supplements, because that'll probably take us a good 30 minutes on its own. But tell me a little bit about vitamins. Why are they important, and do we need to supplement them?
Well, vitamins are important because they're involved in different bodily processes. So parts of metabolism don't function properly if we don't have enough vitamin in our body. So a lot of those things, they just kind of play a back role in a lot of things. And the vitamins that we get in our diet can come from a number of different sources. We have some that we call water soluble, and then we have some that are called fat soluble. So obviously those that are fat soluble have to be ingested with a fat source to be absorbed. And then we have, some that can be carried through the body with water. So I always encourage people to eat a variety of foods to ensure that we're, getting enough vitamin intake. Some people struggle to get adequate variety in their diet, based on geographic location, the time of year, what kinds of foods they have access to from a financial standpoint. So there are some people who would benefit from a vitamin supplement, and then sometimes it's not necessary. Always asking my wonderful physicians that I work with, if I feel there is a deficiency present, we do the things to determine if a patient would benefit from vitamin supplement versus just giving it to them.
So you've mentioned a variety of different foods on a couple of occasions, and I think this would be a good time for me to plug local produce. There seems to be multiple advantages to eating local produce as opposed to something that is shipped halfway across the country. What are your thoughts on that?
One of the easiest ways to decrease your carbon footprint is to eat local. You're not only doing some benefits for the environment from that, but you're also supporting local economy. I grew up on a farm, and so gardening and canning and preserving was always a big part of my life. And I know how hard it is to, even just on a small family farm, the work that goes into that is definitely something that we should be supporting. So I agree with that.
And
Thank you for bringing that up.
I think that, if you've got, there's certain certain grocery stores in big cities that they're buying local because they really promote it. We live in a relatively smallish big city, and I think if we walk into, and I may be wrong, and I've walked into our local Kroger's, and I can't tell what's local and what isn't. And it may be that I'm just not paying attention, but it sure would be helpful if I knew that the spinach or, God forbid, lettuce is grown locally. Because I would tend to buy that more than stuff that's not grown locally, if I could.
Mm-hmm. There are a few smaller grocery stores, and then at different parts of the town, sometimes they do farmers markets and things like that. And there are a few providers that I know in the area that kind of, the farmers will kind of talk to them and say, hey, talk to your patients, tell them to send them here. This is where we are. Maybe they can come and get their produce from us.
Yeah, that would be nice. That would be very, very nice. Let's talk a little bit about, so we're settling down in the evening. We've had our dinner, but like many Americans, as I sit down and kind of relax, I can hear the refrigerator calling me. And so what should my response be? Should I take a sledgehammer to the refrigerator, or are there certain things that I can use at late night snacking that's not going to throw everything cattywampus?
So late night snacking, I think where a lot of people struggle with that is the foods that you want to gravitate towards are more calorically dense versus more nutrient dense.
Are you
foods.
talking about my Cheetos again?
But having something that might help if you're truly hungry in the evening is eating something that's a little bit higher in fiber. Having convenience produce like fruits and vegetables kind of at hand versus just having, it's really easy to grab the bag of chips versus having to go and maybe, I've talked to moms about having the bags of baby carrots versus buying the bag of the big carrots so that they're already ready to go, and keeping those on eye level. But things like that, we tend to eat the foods that are not the most nutritious late at night. And then if we're overeating at night, that also kind of just disrupts our sleep patterns. We don't sleep as well. So I always, if you're hungry at night, I always tell people, make sure you're really hungry. Check out, behind, thinking, am I really hungry or am I bored? Do I need to, am I thirsty and not really hungry? Do I need to try and drink some water? Sometimes I'll get up and walk, a little bit around my block if I'm like, oh no, I think I'm just bored because I ate just a little bit ago. Try and get my mind a reset before I come back in.
So one of the things you mentioned that we surely need to cover is fiber. First of all, how important is it? What does it do? And do we all need it?
Absolutely. That is, a lot of times I'll have people ask me, if you have one thing I can do, one thing that I can change, in a world where our culture wants you to restrict different foods, I say add more fiber is what I recommend. So it can be very easily done. You can adding a serving of fruit or vegetable in a day, changing out, if you're making a sandwich, instead of using white bread, changing to whole wheat bread, just something like that to increase your fiber intake. It's when you're looking at health as a whole, fiber impacts multiple systems in our bodies for digestive health, for cardiovascular health. Can't say enough about it. It helps regulate our blood sugars, helps keep us full or longer. So it kind of helps, honestly, for people wanting to do some weight management. It does kind of help with that satiety in between meals. And so that's always a go-to. But it does, again, it helps with digestion, cholesterol, all of that stuff.
I would add, there have been, as from a doctor standpoint, there have been studies looking at patients who have a high fiber input versus low fiber input, and you have decreased colon cancer rates in patients with high fiber. And if you want to decrease colon cancer, that's simply an easy way to do it. A mentor of mine was looking at the inflammatory response in the body, and this was in mice. He found that mice that had a high fiber diet had less inflammatory response, and their white cells worked better in fighting off infection. So that just dovetails into exactly what you were saying with the multiple benefits of fiber. So I agree. I cannot hype it enough. Fiber.
I agree. And a lot easier to think, well, I need to add something. I need to eat more of something than I need to restrict.
The last thing I'd like to just briefly get into, and I don't know how much you want to jump into this, is the FDA is currently thinking about these new peptides and trying to see whether they should be, regulated or not regulated. And these are not peptides, as far as I know, that are commonly found in the body. Do you have any thoughts on these things?
I am very hesitant to want to put things into food that we don't necessarily know is safe for human consumption. We don't know exactly what it's going to do, how it's going to interact. So I always encourage just simple, eat real food, eat whole food. I don't get really sciencey with my food. I try and keep it very simple. I think when we start to try and overcomplicate a lot of things, it can tend to make things more difficult on us. So I like to get back to the basics and just do, regular, eat real food.
And let me just add, as you were saying, most of these peptides have not undergone rigorous research. Some of them haven't done any human trials at all.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage anybody who's listening to this to, again, stay with regular food. There's plenty of good food out there, and I would continue to steer away from these compounded peptides. I was going to ask you another question, but it went in one ear and out the other. And I've got this pen. I should be writing them down, but I did not. But do you have any final thoughts for anybody who's listening on how they can kind of focus? I think one of the things that people, including myself, do wrong is that we don't plan what we're going to eat. Instead, it's 5 or 6 in the evening, and then I'm driving home and I've got all these fast food places screaming at me as I drive by. What are your thoughts on that?
I am a mother of 2, working full time, doing a lot of things going on, and they are living their best life and I'm their ride. So I think planning is so important to keeping, not only yourself on track, but also your family. And eating out can get very expensive. You're not preparing the food, so you don't know exactly what's going into it. I know when you're eating in a restaurant, getting a lot of sodium in addition to your food. I am very simple-minded when it comes to planning my meals, but I always plan a time on the weekend where I have my planner open in front of me. I have, my work schedule and kids' schedule kind of written out. And I plan our meals. And I'm not a chef. I'm not I do what I can. I make edible food. But there are days where, I know I'm going to be able to come home and I'm going to have an hour to kind of get something together. And then there are some nights where an hour would be a luxury. So I know I'm going to have to use my crock pot or something, another way to prepare food, or I'll prep and then we can reheat. But I honestly, that is the easiest way to not only keep my kiddos healthy, but also keeps my budget where it needs to be. There's just so many aspects that impact our food choices like that. So I do recommend taking the time, even if it's just 10 minutes to, plan a few meals out for the week and then make enough so you have leftovers to eat the next day.
I would give a shout out to my sister. My sister, who is not a chef, and she is also not a dietitian, but she has learned over the years, because she works and works full time, that on Sundays she will cook her meals for the week.
Oh, wow.
And so she knows what she's going to have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. She always eats out on Friday, so she knows what she's going to have then. And so her diet really has been controlled over the last, 4 or 5 years, where before she was doing what I did, which is kind of a grab bag, I guess you would say. I know what I was going to ask you. It was going to be sodas. Tell me about sodas.
They have a lot of calories, not a lot of nutrients. The I think a lot of studies are going to come out here in the future about children's bone health and the impact that them drinking the sodas as opposed to drinking milk and consuming nutrient-dense foods, what it's going to have for bones.
So let me just dovetail into that and some of that has to do with when you're drinking the sodas. The sodas actually have acid in them, which is grabbing your calcium. So that is what is disrupting your bone metabolism. And so that's where that's coming from.
That and eroding the teeth, dental caries, all of those very simple sugars can. I do not like the sugar sweetened, the regular sodas. I know I can't completely tell people not to drink them at all.
Sure,
but
you can tell them whatever you want.
I would encourage them to, eliminate them as they can from their diet.
Excellent. We have been talking with Jessica Runyon. She is a registered dietitian and is more qualified than I can say to talk about nutrition and food. Jessica, thank you so very, very much for being on Code Clear. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.